So I want to start off by talking to you guys or telling you guys a story about a cold January day in Ohio, in Kent, Ohio. I was a cold January day. It's the morning. I'm sitting in my graduate school, like grad school laboratory, the adolescent developmental psychopathology lab, and I'm just typing away and I'm having a great time. Like I'm in the zone, just typing away. And all of a sudden, my phone starts to ring, and I glance down at it, and I'm like, oh gosh, not Mari. But I should probably answer the phone call from Mari. And so I slide it over and I'm like, hey, Mari. And in true like bulldozer Mari form, she cuts right in and interrupts me. And she goes, Kelly's dead. And I took a step back. I sat down in my chair. I got up real quick and I walked to our little fake living room laboratory where we do research on romantic couples who are in college. And I sat down on the gray IKEA couch and I just was trying to listen to Mari, but I don't remember much of that conversation because I was smacked by my own internal thoughts of running through the warning signs. And I was like, some $1 million suicide researcher you are. Okay, it wasn't really $1 million. It was like 999,999, but it was close enough to a million that we just said a million. I'm like, some researcher you are. You missed 80% of the warning signs that Kelly was showing when you saw her 6 months ago. And so when I talk about warning signs, I talk about, is path warm? So ideation, I didn't have any idea that my friend Kelly was thinking about killing herself. Ideation, P is purposeless. Well, yeah, she felt purposeless because she was in college and she was at this school in Colorado and she was loving it. And then her parents forced her to come back. Anxiety and agitation and anger. Absolutely, she was experiencing more of that because her whole world had changed. And then we have trapped. She absolutely felt trapped because her parents wouldn't really let her leave, even though she was an adult. She was like 20 years old. Hopeless. She absolutely felt hopeless because she felt like she had found exactly what she wanted to do with her life, but then it was ripped from her. So that's the is path. And then we have, substance use. I forgot the S in there. So substance use, she was absolutely drinking more often than she typically was. She was telling me how she was blacking out, 6 months ago when I had seen her, and she was drinking way more than I had ever seen her drink before. Let's see, is path, and then warm. The W is withdrawal. She was my friend on the phone call. Mari was telling me that how she had pulled away and she stopped sleeping on Mari's couch, and Mari hadn't talked to her in a while. And then agitation and anxiety, more of those kind of things. Anger, that was coming up. The restlessness, she was absolutely more restless than she typically was. And then the mood changes, she had significantly changed. And so I just remember sitting there and being like, you missed 80%. 80% of the warning signs. How could you miss 80% of the warning signs? And as I look back and reflect on that, the reason why I missed 80% of the warning signs is because here's the unfortunate truth about suicide. If someone is truly contemplating taking their life, they are not sitting there shooting off the flares and saying, hey, you, everyone, tomorrow at 9:37 a.m., I'm going to take my life. That's the unfortunate truth of suicide. I have seen it time and time again because the number one question that we ask when we hear someone has died by suicide is, we never saw it coming. I had no idea. Because when people when they feel trapped, when they feel purposeless, when they feel like they have no hope, then they're not sending up those red flares. And so, what I want to kind of focus in on today's talk is the idea that in order to prevent suicide, because of this unfortunate truth of suicide, we need to go upstream. We need to go into suicide prevention, and we need to start creating environments and conditions that people don't want to kill themselves, that they don't feel hopeless, that they don't feel trapped, that they don't feel purpose. They need to be contributors and they need to feel like they belong. And so that's what we're going to do on this talk today. And it can totally be interactive and those kind of things. But you're at to unmute yourself because I'm looking at my camera and not my computer, so I can't see you. But so by the end of this talk today, 67 people would have attempted to take their life. That's because every 27 seconds, an American tries to take their life. And by the end of this hour that you and I are spending together today, 3 Americans would have died by suicide. And so it's 49,000 Americans every single year are dying by suicide. And 1.4 million Americans are attempting to take their life every single year. I don't know about you, but these numbers are not okay. And so one thing that I'm super not satisfied, thankful that one of the reasons why I was thankful that I was on that suicide grant from the CDC was because we did a lot on how do we prevent suicide in teenagers. And what we looked at was Dr. Thomas Joyner's model. He wrote a book on like why people kill themselves. And his model was mostly on adults, but we were trying to take it into adolescents. And what he found was there are 3 predictors for people who die by suicide. And those 3 predictors are thwarted belongingness. So people feeling like they don't belong anywhere, perceived burdensomeness. People who die by suicide believe that they are an absolute burden and they are not contributing to their family and their loved ones or their workplace at all. And then the last one is by far the hardest one to comprehend, and it's the longest one. So stick with me for a second. It's an acquired capacity to enact lethal harm on yourself. And so what that means is that suicide is almost like you have to build up a pain tolerance to suicide because you have to be able to kind of use these lethal methods to take your own life. And so what we were looking at victimization, so abuse, peer victimization, bullying, people who have had significant health issues, and so like they're just being able to have to do harder things onto their body, more painful things onto their body, and it kind of builds up this tolerance. And so what I want to kind of focus in on is like, okay, how have I seen these 3 play out, these 3 predictors play out? And then knowing these 3 predictors, how do we kind of start to create families, and how do we create environments and conditions where people don't want to die? And so the first one, let's talk about thwarted belongingness. I remember some of you probably know who she is. Her name's Leslie Wyrick, and she is a huge suicide speaker. She focuses a lot on men's health and mental health, and she's focusing on a lot on like military. And I know her story, her son's story, she talks about it quite often. And one of the things that she talks about is when Austin, the day that he died by suicide, earlier in the day, he had a fight with the girl that he was dating. And he had struggled his whole life with romantic relationships. And so that day that he chose to take his life, at that moment, chances are he didn't feel like he belonged anywhere. And so that's one of the biggest predictors that we see, is that when people don't feel like they belong, they're going to kind of be more likely to take their life. And this is not something, I'm going to switch over real quick. This is not something that we want them to have on a regular basis. Let's see, bear with me 1 second. That's not what I want. And so the idea that thwarted belongingness was the factor that took Austin's life is something to kind of talk about. But then we also have stories of hope when it comes to belongingness. And so if you ever listened, most of you probably don't know, but I used to have a podcast. It's called the Bright Spot Podcast. And at the beginning, the first season, we talked a lot. It was me and another co-host, Lindsay, and we talked, not Lindsay Dowd, Lindsay Finnegan, and we talked about all like psychological concepts and like cognitive and those kind of things. But then when Lindsay went and had a baby, how dare she? I kind of continued it on and I started interviewing people. And one of the people that I interviewed was my husband. And during that episode, he revealed something that most people don't know about my husband. And he was talking about this time when he was, I think it was when he was still in at Ohio State, and he was a mechanical engineering major, and he had just failed completely. And it was going to college for him was such a terrible shift because he's a highly intelligent, like high IQ guy, but he never had to study. And so when he went to college, he didn't have the study skills that he needed. And so there was this one semester that he tells me that he had to go to dinner with his parents and tell them that he had literally had earned like a 0.71 GPA that semester. And so he was drinking. He's 6'6". So this won't be, if you know that, then it won't be too terrible. But he was drinking like 12 beers a day, like every single day. He was going out and drinking, and it was just in a really bad spot. And there was one day where he was like, all right, I'm going to take my life. And as he was going to the bathroom to grab pills, there was a commercial, and it was for the Marine Corps. And it was talking about how you can belong and how you can feel like you're a part of something. And that commercial actually saved my husband's life because in that moment, he felt like he belonged. And so belongingness can save people. And so especially now that we're seeing more and more AI, and people are having, friendships and relationships with their AI bots, which just seems so against everything that I believe in. We want to start kind of creating environments where people feel connected and people feel like they belong. And so when I talk about families and how can you get your families to feel like they belong, one of the things that I talk about is like your family values. Like when you say like, okay, mottos are this way. If you were like, okay, what is like the dominating characteristic of your last name and people in your family? Mine mottos: we are sarcastic, we are snarky, and we will poke at you. And that's the only way that you know that we like you, because if we're not making fun of you, we don't like you. And so like, what is that characteristic? What is that family unit? What is that like? We are this way. And because you're a part of that, that means you're a part of us. And then other ways you can talk, like family values. Like, what are those family values that you find important? What are those memories that you're making with your families? What are the traditions? As Christmas is coming around, one of the things that my family always does, and it always makes us feel that we belong on Christmas Eve, because we're Mexican, we make tamales from scratch. And I will argue that they are the best tamales you will ever taste in your life. And actual other people have said that, not just like our family. But the joke is always, and when we get together, I don't know why this comes up, but it always comes up because my dad, like, as we're teaching people how to spread the masa, my dad will simply say, spread it like Andrea. And now it's become a joke. Like everyone's just like, spread it like Andrea, spread it like Andrea. And so it's this joke, but again, it's belongingness. It's those inside jokes. Everyone feels like they belong in this tradition because everyone gets the joke. Everyone knows what's going on and everyone is poking fun at each other. So whatever that dominating characteristic is of your family, highlight that, make it memorable, make it a thing in your family. Other ways to kind of increase belongingness, maybe outside your family. One thing that I suggest is there's research out there that says like you can only really like really truly know like up to like 150 people. And so take an Excel spreadsheet. I know Scott talks about it all the time and like who's your Oprah, but that's only like 20 people. So this is a little bit different. But create an Excel file, like a spreadsheet with however many people you want to list, like people in your life that you want to build a relationship with. And you put in that spreadsheet, you list them out, you put in some, interesting facts about them. When's their birthday? Where do they live? What's their cell phone number? All of those things that they like. So like for Chase and I would be like, okay, he's a Michigan fan, but he's a Michigan fan, right? So like, okay, those kind of things, and put those interesting things into it. And every so often, make it work for you. Is it every day? Is it every week? Is it every month? Just go through your spreadsheet and start connecting with people. Reach out to them, text them, email them, send them a gift. That's my love language. Send them a gift, send them mail, send them something, a message or anything, just to let them know that you are thinking about them, just to build those relationships. Maybe you're having conversations with them on a regular basis, but like people need to know that they belong somewhere and that they are connected to other people. So that's the first factor that I wanted to talk about today, burdensomeness. We want to combat that. I remember whenever people come to me and they would always be like, okay, I think this person's suicidal. My first thing is like, make them feel like they belong. Invite them over for games or board games, or go out to dinner or lunch or grab coffee, something. Make them feel like they belong. I remember, when was it? It was October of 2024. It was 10 o'clock at night. My husband and I were watching TV, and for some reason, it was just like, check your email. And so I checked my email, and all of a sudden, I had an email from one of my football players' ex-girlfriends. And she was like, hey, Dr. Mata, like, I don't know if you know, like, she's like, I don't know, think you remember me. Hopefully you do. Like, I'm so and so's ex-girlfriend. And I just wanted you to let you know, like, I'm worried about him. Like he talked about taking his life like last week. Can you reach out to him? And I'm like, oh my God, it's like 10:14 on a Saturday night. And I remember calling our head coach and him being like, oh my goodness. And then I'm like texting him and he's not responding. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to text his best friend. So I text his best friend. I'm like, have you seen T? And he's like, yeah, he was just with me. And I'm like, I'm like, okay, like, all right. So then eventually, so we ended up, yes, the next day, T, E, and I all went out to lunch, and we were just talking about like belonging and all of the things, just to make sure that T felt like he belonged, even though he was no longer in our program because he graduated. And so figuring out ways to make people feel like they belong. All right, let's go to number 2, perceived burdensomeness. So the story that I kind of talk about here is, I remember when I was a junior in college and I did a semester. This is going to sound so silly because I'm originally from Chicago, but I did a semester in downtown Chicago learning about urban planning and those kind of things and social justice and that stuff. And I remember I met a friend, her name was Kylie, and her and I bonded, and we created this very morbid group called the Dead Brothers Club. My brother who had been murdered, and then her brother who had committed or died by suicide. Um, and I remember her telling me that he left a suicide note. So he was one of the 25% of people who die by suicide who left a suicide note. And in the suicide note, it started off along the lines of like, I am a burden on everybody and I can no longer take it. And it was just like he felt like he was not contributing to society because he was like 30 years old and he was living back at home, and he didn't feel like he was contributing in any kind of way. And so he ended up dying by suicide. And Kylie and I would talk about it quite often about it. And it was just terrible um that he thought that. And so when people feel like they're not contributing and that they are a tax on their family's resources, they are more likely to die by suicide. But then here's the story of hope. I remember when I was a senior in college, and one of my very, very best friend, Lauren, she wakes up one morning and it turned out that her cousin, who was a teenager, had attempted suicide. And because she felt like she just wasn't contributing, I think she was 14 at the time, but she just felt like she wasn't contributing. She thought that she was using up all of her parents' money and all of those things. And I remember, and thankfully they found her before her attempt got any worse, and they were able to save her life. And then now, like, she's a mom and she's got beautiful children, and she feels like she's making a contribution to society, and she feels like she has purpose. And so when I talk about, okay, how can we build families where people feel like they're not burdens on others? The topic that I always bring in is autonomy, or not autonomy, competence. And we want kids to feel like they are teens and individuals and people. We want them to feel like they're competent. And so a lot of the times I encourage parents, let your kids choose what extracurricular activities they want to do. Let them choose their majors. And you all might be like, this just makes sense. But no, like, I was a college professor, and I remember there were so many students who could not choose their own major or even their minor. I remember a student walked in and she was a PT, a physical therapy major, and they have to take three psych classes for their major. And she came to my office and she's like, I really want to get a psych minor. And I was like, okay, well then do it, you only have to take three more classes. And she's like, my parents won't let me. And I was like, what do you mean your parents won't let you? So it's letting them choose their extracurricular activities that they're competent in, that they're good at, letting them choose majors that they're good at, that they feel competent, that they have a sense of purpose, and allowing them to choose and go into careers where they think they can make an impact instead of choosing it for them. I get so frustrated sometimes with my in-laws because they have these ideas of what careers my three kids are going to go into, and I'm like, I don't care what careers they're going to go into. Like, two times every year, at the beginning of the school year and at the end of the school year, I always do these little boards, and one of the questions is, what are you going to be? And sometimes my son says he's going to be a clown. And I'm like, all right, go be a clown. Like, go do whatever it is I don't care what he is. As long as he's feeling competent and as long as he feels like he has a purpose, sure, go be a clown. I don't care. And so, like, allowing people to have purpose, allowing people to feel competent. Another way, like, globally, that we can increase people's or lessen people's perception that they're burdens is contributions, having people go out and volunteer and actually see what they are doing is making an impact on someone else's life. So are you volunteering at soup kitchens? Are you, going and building with Habitat for Humanity? Are you going on the Nicaraguan trip with the Outliers? Like, are you seeing those things? And so, and I always talk about, like, when someone tells me, like, oh, I'm concerned that someone is thinking about taking their life. And I'm like, okay, this is what I want you to do. I want you to call that person and be like, hey, I need help with this project. Come on over and help me. I don't care what the project is, but if you present it in that way, maybe then you can save that person's life because you're inviting them over, you're asking them for help, and you're letting them see that they have purpose, that they are useful, that they are contributing, like, they're contributing members. I have a client right now. I love her to pieces. She cracks me up because sometimes we joke, like, I drew out because she has a very, very thick accent, like a Southern accent. And so sometimes when she says black, it's like black. And, like, you have to, like, do a translation. And so I have, like, almost like a picture. We joke. I've drawn, like, pictures and I write the word underneath so that I can translate what she's saying. I can understand her now, but at the beginning I was like, ah. But she, because of an injury that she has, she will tell me quite often, like, I feel useless. And this is the client that I'm always worried about suicide for her. And so I'm always like, no, like, go see your grandkids, go, like, take care of them, go watch them, like, go make contributions to society, because that's going to reduce the perceived burdensomeness. Okay, last one, the acquired capacity to enact lethal harm. And so the story, the sad story that I have for this one is, when I was a college professor, one of the other faculty members, his name's Dr. Leach, he was dating this woman, or he was married to this woman named Carol, and they were actually the ones, when I came to interview at the University of Findlay, they're actually the ones that picked me up from the airport and took me to Tony's Diner for lunch, the night before I was interviewing. And so I met both Carol and John is his first name. But fast forward a few years, and Carol had there it ended up being some kind of like infection in her teeth, but they didn't know it, and it was causing all of these health issues, and it was just working up, and she just didn't feel like there was any kind of out, and she had built up a pain tolerance because of all the medical treatments that she was going to. And I remember I heard that she had died, but I was like, oh, okay. And so I went to the funeral and those kind of things. But John and I were in our office one day, and he looked at me, he's like, I'm just so mad at Carol. And I was like, why? Why? That seems strange. I'm like, why? And he's like, Andrea, don't you know? And I was like, no, what? And he was like, she died by suicide. And I was like, oh, I'm so sorry, John. And he's like, I'm just searching. He's like, I'm tearing up the house looking for a suicide note, because I know she left me a suicide note. And in my brain, like, the suicide researchers going through, and I'm like, oh God, there's probably not a suicide note, because only 25% of people who die by suicide leave a suicide note. And I'm like, I hope you find it, John. I don't know if he ever did, but that perceived that build up of being able to the pain tolerance, that you're going to be able to enact that lethal harm. Now, the story of hope, I remember. So one thing, and I definitely need to like knock on some wood on this one, is with all my years of being a psychologist and working with some pretty intense, severe individuals who are at risk for suicide, I'm happy to report that none of my clients have ever died by suicide, but I did come real close one time. I remember I had a client, how old was she? She was like in her late 20s, and she has borderline personality disorder. So she's the type of person that's like hot, cold, love, hate very, 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 very quickly. And I remember we were in session, and I got vibes that she was thinking about killing herself. And I looked at her, and I started asking her questions about it. And she just looked at me straight. She's like, if you hospitalize me, I'm just going to go into the hospital. I'm going to say all of the right things. They're going to release me. And then as soon as they release me, I'm going to die. I'm going to kill myself. And I'm like, oh, what do I do? What do I do? And so I did as best as I can. And I gave her, usually you don't give her your cell phone number, but I gave her my cell phone number that night. And I was pregnant with my twins at that point, and it was June or July. And I remember that night I went to bed, and then I woke up for some reason at like 10:45, and I looked, and I had a text message from her. And it was like, I'm so sorry, Andrea. I just couldn't do it anymore. Like, I just couldn't deal with, because she had been recently sexually assaulted. And she's like, I just can't do it anymore. And so I started freaking out. I ended up trying to call her. She didn't answer. I called the police station. They were like, well, you have to call this police station and this police station and this police station. And I'm like, pregnant with twins, and it's freaking like 11 o'clock at night. And I'm like, what is going on? And finally I hear that I got a hold of someone, and I explained the situation, and they're like, oh. They're like, Dr. Mater, they're like, we just sent an ambulance to her house. She took a bunch of her diabetes medication, but then as soon as she took them, she called the police because she regretted it. She didn't want to die, and so we just picked her up in the ambulance. We're taking her to the hospital, and we're going to pump her stomach, all of the things. And so I was thankful for that moment. But that's again another like a kind of story of that acquired capacity to enact lethal harm. That she had like had this terrible life. She had been victimized multiple times. She had been abused, and it just kind of led up to it. And she realized like she didn't want to die. And so with this acquired capacity, like what can we do as family? Obviously, it seems pretty self-explanatory, like, and I probably don't even need to say this to a group of outliers, is like don't abuse your kids, because like abusing your kids is going to increase their pain tolerance and increase their likelihood of dying by suicide. But what we really need to be doing is we need to be teaching our youth and our teens and even ourselves coping skills, because especially emotion regulation, and the idea that like, okay, when something bad happens, your emotions are going to go through the roof, but they're only going to last and they're only going to stay there for about 10 to 20 minutes, and you have to ride that wave, and you have to learn how to ride that wave. And as long as you don't do anything that I say, like stupid shit at the top of that wave, at the peak of that volcano, as long as you don't do something too stupid, like you will be okay. But the more coping skills that we can get our teens in, the emotion regulation, the better off it will be, because it will combat that acquired capacity. It'll give them some kind of that'll give them some protection against that predictor of suicide. So those are the three predictors of suicide, to try to go upstream, to combat that unfortunate truth that if someone wants to die by suicide, they're going to do it. And so, but what happens? What do you do? What do you do if you know someone who is actively suicidal? Like, doesn't talking about suicide make it more likely to happen? Well, let me share one more story with you, and then I'll talk about this. I remember it was a spring afternoon. I had just been in Columbus all day for continued education on brain hijacking, like where your emotions get the best of you or drugs get the best of you. And I just spent all day in this neuroscience workshop all day. And I remember driving back, and all of a sudden I pop, like a phone call pops up on my Jeep's console, and it's the head softball coach at the school, at the university that I used to teach at, and I had like a role in athletics. And she calls me, and she's like, Andrea, she's like, I'm worried about one of my players. I think she's isolating. She's telling me all these things. And as she's talking, I'm ticking off all of the is path warning signs. And I'm like, okay. I'm like, she's like, what should I do? And I'm like, this is what I want you to do. Take your graduate assistant after practice today. What I want you to do is I want you to go to her apartment, because she wasn't at practice because she was taking a mental health day. Go to her apartment, and I want you to ask her these three questions. And I'm like, the three questions are, and you're going to ask them point blank. You're not going to be like, hey, maybe, like, no, you're going to come right direct, and you're going to ask them, and you're going to mean them, because you might be saving her life. I'm like, the three questions one, are you thinking about killing yourself? And if they say yes to that question, the second question is, do you have a plan? And if they say yes to that question, then you ask the third question. And the third question is, do you have the means or the methods to carry out that plan? And so she's like, but won't that? She's like, are you sure? And I'm like, ask her these three questions. And so she's like, okay. So then I'm, sitting at my house, just kind of hanging out with my husband again. Again, it's like 10 o'clock at night. I don't know why all of these things happen around 10 o'clock at night. And all of a sudden I get a text message from her that says, hey, we're heading over to our apartment now. And then about another hour later, it said, hey, we're heading to Orchard Hall, which is like our crisis intervention, like ER facility. And so what happened was the coach and the grad assistant go over, they asked the first question, they asked the second question, and they asked the third question. And here were her answers. When they asked her the first question, she looked at them and said, well, when the two of you guys leave, I'm going to hop in my car, and I'm either going to find a wall to drive into, or I'm going to drive off a bridge. And they were like, ah. And so then they're like, well, would you be willing to go to Orchard Hall? And she said, yes. And so they took her to Orchard Hall, and she got admitted that night. And I'm happy to report that she is still alive and she's doing so well. She's a pharmacist now and she's living a beautiful life. And it was all because these coaches just chose to ask these 3 questions. And so those are the 3 questions that I would encourage anyone, if you have any kind of concerns that anyone is thinking about taking their life, those are the 3 questions that you do, or that you ask. And don't be afraid to ask them, because you can literally save a life by asking those 3 questions. And the more that we can reduce thwarted belongingness, the more that we can make people feel like they belong, the more that we can make people feel like they're contributors to society, the more that we can reduce abuse and increase coping skills. And if everyone in this room is doing that and then is teaching other people to do those things, and we're going upstream, well, then maybe, just maybe, we can stomp out suicide. And so I will pause there. I just threw a whole lot at you all, and I am open to questions or conversation.
Ray, can you just repeat the questions again? It was, are you thinking about killing yourself? Do you have a plan? And do you have the means? Is that it?
Yes. So the 3 questions. Yep. Are you thinking about killing yourself? Do you have a plan? And do you have the means to carry out that plan?
Okay. Thanks.
Mhm.
Great.
I can agree with that. Having thought about killing myself, having had a plan, and having had the means, those are exactly the questions to ask. And
Mhm.
I was very close to it, but thankfully in that moment realized that I was here for a reason, and it's to help others become more aware of mental health issues, and help others identify that, hey, you do belong, and there is a place for you in this world. And that's why I left my job a few weeks ago, is to start focusing on that, because I know that there's a lot of people that need it. So been there, thankfully haven't done that, but very
Didn't get the
close to.
t-shirt.
No, and it's not one of those shirts you want.
No,
but,
no one wants that shirt.
It was, it's something I've become, and I don't know that I told Scott the full story, but he knew that I wanted to talk about mental health back when I started with this organization, and work, of course, got in the way, to the point to where I said, I can't let work get in the way anymore, because I want to help others. So I appreciate what you've said, and I can speak to the honesty and truth about it.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you so much for giving us this, Dr. Dre, today. And I'm not ending it. I just want to say thank you. And Michael, thank you for sharing that with us. You are not alone. And I love the fact that this is a place where you feel like you can share that. But when you do that, it allows other people to. So I really want to take a second to just thank you for that, and thank God that you're here on this call today.
Thank you. I will be sharing it with the world in 2026. But I've learned that you can't hide those things, and it's hard, right? It's not easy. Most people don't feel comfortable saying it, and when you see me talk about it online, I came to the conclusion that a lot of people don't like or comment because they don't want to be judged as, oh, they liked it, therefore maybe they feel that way, right? So I don't take it personal. I know that it's reaching people, because when I talk to them, they're like, thank you for posting that, I really appreciate it, I needed to hear that today. Or I will get messages, and that's what matters. Like, I don't care if it saves one person, it's worth it. That's all that matters.
Yeah, absolutely. Other questions, other comments?
I'll echo everything that's been said. What Kathy just said. Michael, thank you for sharing that. I had my own moments in 2008, which I share from stage now. There are people listening that aren't telling anybody else. That who do you admit it to? And I also watched my father go through a process of multiple attempts and eventually commit suicide. So, and then 30 years as a firefighter, intervening or participating in those events in various ways. Dr. Dre, my question is about agency, about choice, control, capacity. That's where my darkness came from, was that point in life when you don't feel like you have agency. Where would you put those in those three categories, or those three in your research or thinking? How do you think about that?
So agency is one of the topics that I talk about a lot. So like in my TED Talk, From Murder to Mission, How I Found My Life's Mission, or Life's Calling, I talk about agency, and I think people need to be agents in their own life. I would put that into the third predictor, so the acquired capacity to enact lethal harm, meaning like those coping skills. I think people realizing that they can be an agent in their own life and that they can change their life, and they have the ability, they have the control, they're not a victim. I think that goes under that coping thoughts or coping skills.
Thank you.
I agree.
Hey, Dre, can you talk a little bit about the terminology that's being used today around suicide? I know we're not supposed to say commit suicide anymore. We're supposed to say like die by suicide. Can you just tell us the right terms and then why?
Yeah, so I struggle so much because all of the years that I did research on suicide, I was always committed suicide.
Yeah.
And now there's been a push probably over the last 2-3 years to not say commit suicide, because committed means that there's like a decision, or it means that like when you hear the word committed, you think someone committed a violent act, or they broke the law, or they were a criminal. That's usually what we think about. And so there's been a push over the last few years to use the terminology of die by suicide and not committed suicide. I slipped today, so like I will still slip, and I try to change it because I try to acknowledge, and I try to kind of value or validate, the people that are really in this space and are doing that kind of work. So usually people will say like die by suicide compared to committed.
I refer to Leslie on that one because I try to model her, because that's where I learned about that. I had no idea before that.
Yeah. Leslie's the one that's kind of, her and I have had gone back and forth, because I have always been committed. Because in my mind, the person, like when I talked about like the unfortunate truth about suicide, like the person, they are taking measures to kind of hide it. And that's why we need to go upstream before this is even kind of an issue.
You two live pretty close together.
Leslie, yeah, we're about an hour and a half away. So like sometimes we'll meet, she'll drive 45 minutes, I'll drive 45 minutes, and we'll meet in Antwerp, Ohio.
Okay.
We're actually
my son's
meeting
over in South Bend, not too far.
Yeah, Leslie and I are actually meeting on January 16th, because I'm heading over to Valpo for my two best friends are being honored in the Hall of Fame at Valpo.
Cool. I'd
Dr.
like to
Dre,
meet her one day.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Can you talk a little bit about the letting go of be able to actually prevent someone that when you've done all the things?
Yeah, I mean, it is so hard, because when I talk to people, it's like, okay, yes, make them feel like they belong, ask them to do things, ask them to hang out, ask them to help you, offer to pay for therapy or to get coaching or something along those lines. But you don't have control over other people. And so I think we have to like realize, and we have to let go of the idea that we don't have control over another human being, and that they're going to make the choices that they're going to make. And hopefully it doesn't end in suicide, but sometimes it does. And so I think if you've asked them to, do things with you, if you've asked them to help you, and you've offered, therapy and coping skills and coaching, and they're not willing to take it, well, then I think it's not going to make it easier if they do die by suicide. But it's going to be probably a struggle that then that person is going to have to go to therapy to process and kind of get off their chest. I remember like when I realized like I missed 80% of my friends' warning signs, I had to come to grips with that of like, I literally have publications on suicide prevention and I could not save my friend. And so I've had to let that go.
Well,
It's not
and this
easy, though.
event happened after a conversation that you and I had, because there's someone in my life that is actively struggling, and it's very hard to offer, make the offers and watch it and know that there is nothing other than that, and that they have to make the choices themselves.
Yeah,
Kathy,
you can only do so much.
took a long time dealing with my own father's decision, and then having a child that was an active heroin addict for over 15 years. And I used to, for my job, I used to go check the welfare, which was typically a call family was wanting us. And I had to go do that for my son numerous times. And so it's that, and I couldn't stop him. He's now clean. He's now building a family and a life, but it's that pain that is very unique. Talk about it, share it, and hear from others. It won't sink in and it doesn't remove it, but just hearing it again and again, you aren't responsible for what other people choose.
Yeah, one of the reasons why this community is so valuable. And I knew I could call Dr. Dre or others. And so I appreciate that.
And
Anyone
guys,
else? Go ahead.
Walks the walk. She wondered why I wasn't in the top speakers meeting today. And she's like, "Are you okay?" I just didn't have it on my calendar. So she check on me.
Dr. Dre, I mean, I know for me, sometimes the holidays are pretty hard for a number of different reasons. Do you find that people struggle a lot more during the holidays, or is it just consistent? Does it really matter?
I want to say I'm like struggling in my mind right now to keep the research straight. And I want to say that it's not necessarily during the holidays that the increased likelihood is after the holidays. So like it's after the holidays, because during the holidays, everyone is around, everyone's kind of feeling like they belong. And then when after the holidays and then kind of January, February, March, that's when it's riskier or like the rates are higher. I think I'll have to look into it and get back to you guys, but I think that's the case because they're losing out that belongingness. They're losing out that, purposeless or that purposeness. And so I think that's the case, that it's actually January, February, March. That's the riskiest times.
Okay. Interesting.
I struggled both. Like I just remember back that I was always kind of numb during the holidays and down, and everybody called, my wife and kids always called me the Grinch. They still do, just out of joking now. But I think it was both, right? Because leading into the holidays, you just don't really feel like you want to deal with all that, at least when you're really down. And then after, of course, the family's not around anymore to help carry you a little bit further. So it carries, it's definitely a carryover effect.
Yeah. And I think that's the other thing that a lot of people don't realize is that depression, like lots of people are like, oh, that person's depressed. Could they be suicidal? And they start to kind of like surround that person. And that's actually that's a myth. And because depression is actually a pretty terrible predictor of suicide, because for every 600 people who are depressed, only one of them will attempt suicide. But the the riskiest part when it comes to suicide is depression, and suicide is actually when the person is in a depressive state, when they're coming out of that depressive state and they're starting to kind of go more up to what's called euthymia, which is like contentment, like middle of the road mood. When they're kind of coming out of that depressive state, that's when they're actually at higher risk for suicide, because they have the energy to enact that lethal harm onto themselves.
I do believe that. I've explained to people before. I mean, I've never struggled really with suicide, but I do suffer from depression, and through medication and things that I do and continually reinforcing things, therapy, all kinds of things. But I've tried to explain to people there's a difference between, and my doctor actually that I've had for like 25 years is the one that recognized it, but there's a difference between just being sad and bummed out and, and people versus really being depressed.
Yeah.
There's definitely a difference.
All right. We got about 3 more minutes. Anyone else? I know, Kristen, you just joined us.
I did. I'm sorry.
It is okay.
My workshop just ended, but I thought I would at least grab some golden nuggets from you, even if it's 3 minutes worth.
Anything else, anyone?
Just for everybody's knowledge, one of the things that happened to me when I finally decided that I did want to be here was the decision, and you talk about making choices, and the decision and choice to not rely on others for my happiness. Because it used to be that if somebody made me feel like I was unhappy or I didn't agree with me or didn't like what I said, I take it personal. I take things personal, but I decided I take it personal. Okay, here's my moment. Boom, I'm done. I move on. And when you stop relying on others for your happiness, because I've turned into a very happy person. I choose it every day and I talk about it. That makes a big difference.
Yeah. I remember my sophomore year of college, I was taking a photography class, and at our end of the semester project, we had to, like our final, we had to like come up with some kind of theme. And me being sophomore, in college, I went up to my professor and I was like, and she's very cynical. She's like, okay, what's the theme of yours? And I was like, happiness. And she's like, okay, so what are you going to take pictures of? I was like, my boyfriend, ice cream. And she's like, does your boyfriend make you happy? And I was like, yeah. She's like, no, he doesn't make you happy. And I was like, he doesn't? She's like, no one can make you feel a certain kind of way. And I was like, okay. So then I changed it. I was like, enhancements to my happiness was the theme of my final project.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you for coming.
It's been great.
Thanks for coming. And thank you for sharing your story, Mike.
Sure thing. You're welcome.
All right. No one else?